For decades, Harley Davidson owned the emotional side of motorcycling. The sound, the pride, the long road, the American garage dream, it all pointed back to Harley. But markets do not protect memories forever. They move when riders move. And right now, more riders are moving toward motorcycles that cost less, way less, and do not punish the wallet after the sale. That is where Royal Enfield becomes dangerous. Not because it is louder, not because it has deeper roots in America, but because it is making the decision easier at the exact moment Harley made it harder. And if that shift keeps building, Harley's biggest problem may not be losing loyal riders. It may be missing the next ones. Watch till the end, because the numbers make this even harder to ignore. The price wall. You walk into a dealership today, and before you even think about riding, you are doing math. That is where the problem starts. The price shows up first, and it shuts everything else down. You are not thinking about the road or the sound or the feel. You are thinking about whether this even makes sense to pay. That changes the entire experience. The emotional pull that used to drive the decision never gets a chance to take hold. When entry starts around $10,000, the conversation shifts instantly. It becomes a financial decision instead of a riding decision. That alone explains why fewer people are stepping in. Riders are not rejecting motorcycles. They are rejecting the cost attached to getting one in the first place. There is a difference, and it matters more than most people want to admit. When something feels out of reach before it even begins, it does not matter how good it is. This is not about preference or loyalty or brand identity. It is about whether someone can realistically justify the purchase. Right now, a lot of people cannot. And when that first step never happens, the rest of the journey disappears with it. The barrier is not subtle, and it is not temporary. It is right there in front of anyone who walks in. Once that wall goes up, the effects do not stop at the door. The missing riders. If you have been around bikes long enough, you have already seen it. Riders who used to be everywhere are showing up less often. Some still own their bikes, but they are not putting on the same miles. Others are stepping away completely and not coming back. This is not sudden, and it is not dramatic. It is slow and steady. The kind of change that builds over time until it becomes impossible to ignore. For years, the expectation was simple. As one group stepped back, another group would step in. That is not happening at the same pace anymore. The riders leaving are not being replaced fast enough. That creates a gap, and that gap keeps getting wider. You can feel it without needing a report to confirm it. This is not about trends or opinions. It is about numbers of people actually riding. The cycle that kept everything moving forward is slowing down. That shift is quiet, but it carries weight. The result is a thinner base. Fewer active riders means fewer buyers, and fewer buyers means less momentum across the entire market. When participation drops like that, the impact shows up everywhere. And once that starts happening, the data begins to reflect it clearly. If this is already lining up with what you've been seeing out there, hit like, so this reaches more riders who need it, subscribe for the full breakdown, and share your take below, because this shift affects every decision you make next. The brutal numbers. The numbers are not complicated, and they do not need interpretation. Royal Enfield moves over 1 million motorcycles in a year. Harley Davidson ships just over 100,000. That is not close by any measure. The gap is not just in sales. It shows up in valuation as well. One company gains strength, while the other loses ground. That difference keeps growing over time instead of correcting itself. You can look at shipment data revenue trends and overall performance, and see the same direction repeated again and again. Growth is happening on one side, while decline continues on the other. There is no need to explain that pattern. It is already clear. When results stay consistent like this, they stop being temporary and start becoming a long-term shift. Numbers remove emotion from the situation. They strip away opinion and leave only direction. And the direction here is easy to follow. You do not need to agree with it to recognize what is happening. It is visible in every comparison and every report. That consistency is what makes it hard to ignore. Once something shows up this clearly, it has already been building for a while. The figures do not create the problem, they expose it. And once exposed, the next question becomes unavoidable. Harley's trap. The issue runs deeper than sales numbers. It comes down to how the business was structured from the beginning. Harley built its model around high-margin motorcycles sold in lower volumes. That worked as long as demand stayed strong and predictable. The system relied on repeat buyers. Riders would come back, upgrade, and stay within the brand over time. That loyalty carried the model forward for decades. It was stable, but it was not flexible. What it never built was a strong entry pipeline. There was no scalable path for new riders to enter easily and grow within the system. That weakness stayed hidden as long as the base remained strong. Once volume started to drop, the pressure increased quickly. Costs remained high while sales softened. That imbalance exposed the limits of the model. A structure like this does not adjust easily. It holds its position even when the environment around it changes. That delay makes the impact worse when it finally hits. You can only run a system like that for so long before the cracks begin to show. When they do, they spread fast. This setup works until it does not. And once it stops working, the fall is hard to control. Easy to say yes. It comes down to how fast someone says yes. That is the real difference. When the price sits in a range that feels manageable, the hesitation disappears. The buyer does not walk away to think about it for weeks. The decision happens right there. That speed matters more than most people realize. When a purchase feels low risk, it does not trigger the same resistance. There is no long internal debate, no second guessing, no need to justify it over and over again. It feels simple. This is not just about spending less money. It is about removing friction from the decision itself. The easier it is to say yes, the more often that answer shows up. That creates movement in the market. Buyers move quickly instead of overthinking every detail. They commit earlier and they follow through. That momentum builds volume, and volume creates presence. Presence turns into dominance. It is not about convincing someone. It is about making the decision feel natural instead of heavy. It's not just about cost, it's about how easy it is to say yes. That shift in behavior changes everything before ownership even begins. Once that decision becomes effortless, the experience after purchase starts to matter more. Simple still wins. Ownership is where the difference becomes clear. A machine that works without complication keeps riders engaged. A machine that demands constant attention pushes them away over time. Simplicity removes friction after the purchase. Maintenance stays predictable. Repairs do not feel overwhelming. The rider spends more time on the road and less time dealing with problems. That balance matters. When ownership feels manageable, people keep riding. When it feels like a burden, they start looking for reasons not to. That is where long-term loyalty is built or lost. Complex systems can look impressive, but they often introduce unnecessary difficulty. More components mean more chances for something to go wrong. More complexity means more time spent fixing instead of riding. You don't need anything fancy, you just need something that works every time you hit the starter. That reliability builds confidence. It makes the experience consistent instead of uncertain. Riders trust what they can depend on. When a bike responds the same way, every time it creates a sense of control. That is something riders value more than features they rarely use. As that simplicity becomes noticeable, it starts influencing who feels comfortable stepping into riding at all. The lost entry point. The starting line has moved. New riders are entering through different doors than before. The process feels less intimidating and more approachable from the beginning. Getting started does not feel like a major commitment anymore. It feels like something that can be tried without pressure. That difference lowers the barrier in a way that matters immediately. The learning curve plays a role here. When the machine is easier to handle, the rider builds confidence faster. Early experiences shape long-term behavior. If those experiences feel smooth, people stay with it. Everyone starts somewhere, and right now, it's not where it used to be. That shift is not loud, but it is consistent. It changes how riders enter the market and where they begin their journey. Once that first step becomes easier, more people take it. That creates a steady flow instead of a slow trickle. Over time, that flow becomes a strong foundation. The entry point no longer belongs to one brand. It belongs to whoever makes that first step feel accessible. Bringing people in is only part of the equation. Keeping them engaged is what determines long-term impact. The return loop. Retention is built through consistency. Organized rides and structured events give riders a reason to stay involved. It creates rhythm instead of randomness. Participation becomes something predictable. Riders know there is always another opportunity to get back on the road. That regular engagement strengthens the connection over time. These are not one-time experiences. They are repeated interactions that build familiarity. The more often someone participates, the more natural it feels to continue. It's not about tradition, it's about giving people a reason to ride again next weekend. That approach focuses on activity instead of memory. It keeps riders moving instead of looking backward. The emphasis stays on what they can do next rather than what used to be. Consistency across different regions makes the system stronger. It does not rely on one location or one group. It spreads across a wide base and keeps growing. This creates a cycle. Riders join, they participate, and they return. That pattern builds stability in a way that cannot be forced. Once engagement becomes routine, it stops, depending on excitement alone. It becomes part of how people ride. That kind of system does not fade easily. It keeps reinforcing itself with every new rider who steps in. The profit squeeze. The problem shows up where it matters most. Revenue is dropping and profits are disappearing at the same time. That is the real issue. One can be managed. Both happening together creates pressure that builds fast. The core motorcycle business is no longer carrying the weight it used to. Sales soften, while costs stay where they are. That gap does not stay small. It widens with every quarter that passes. This model depends on steady volume to support high operating costs. When that volume weakens, the structure starts to strain. The balance breaks, and the numbers stop making sense. You can only run a business like this for so long before the cracks show. It does not fail all at once. It shows up in margins first, then in profits, then in overall performance. Each stage gets harder to recover from than the last. When revenue falls and profit turns into loss, the system is no longer stable. It becomes reactive instead of controlled. Decisions stop being strategic and start being defensive. Pressure builds internally, and that pressure forces changes that would not have happened otherwise. As the financial space tightens, the next layer of problems begins to surface. If you want more real breakdowns like this, without the noise, subscribe now. Because stories like this don't stop here, and the next shift is already building. No clear road. Instability at the top creates confusion everywhere else. Leadership changes too often, and direction shifts with it. That is the core issue. When the path forward keeps changing, the company cannot move with confidence. Each new leader brings a different approach. Strategies get introduced and then replaced before they can fully take effect. That lack of consistency slows everything down. A company needs time to execute a plan. Without that time, progress becomes fragmented. Pieces move, but they do not connect. The result is movement without momentum. You can feel it when a company doesn't know what it's trying to be anymore. That feeling spreads through every level of the organization. Teams adjust constantly instead of building towards something stable. Decisions become short-term instead of long-term. When leadership lacks a clear direction, the brand itself starts to drift. it loses focus, and that shows in every part of the business. Consistency builds strength. Constant change weakens it. The instability at the top does not stay isolated. It affects operations, planning, and execution all at once. Direction matters more than movement. Without a clear path, effort becomes scattered. Teams adjust constantly instead of progressing steadily. That instability slows execution and weakens results. Over time, it creates uncertainty throughout the organization. When that uncertainty spreads, it becomes harder to build momentum or maintain confidence in any long-term plan. While leadership shifts back and forth, the damage continues to build in places that are harder to control. Used market pressure. The problem becomes visible in the used market. Inventory builds up faster than it moves. That is where the pressure shows clearly. Bikes sit longer than they used to. Listings stay active without selling. That is a sign of oversupply. When there is more available than people are willing to buy, prices begin to fall. Lower prices in the resale market create a chain reaction. New buyers start looking there instead of at dealerships. That weakens demand for new motorcycles even further. Look at what's sitting unsold that tells you more than any headline ever will. This is not about perception, it is about availability. When options increase and urgency disappears, buyers take their time. That slows the entire cycle. Dealers feel it first, then manufacturers feel it next. The effect moves backward through the system. Oversupply changes behavior. It shifts expectations. Buyers wait for better deals instead of committing early. That delay reduces momentum across the entire market. Fewer immediate purchases mean slower overall movement. Once inventory begins to stack like this, it becomes difficult to reverse quickly. Inventory tells the truth that reports sometimes hide. When products remain unsold, it reflects real demand. A buildup signals imbalance between supply and interest. That imbalance forces adjustments across the market. Prices shift, expectations change, and buyers respond differently. Those changes ripple outward and affect every level of the system. And the impact of that slowdown reaches the rider directly. Wrong bike, wrong rider. At the end of it all, the experience itself begins to feel different. The machine no longer fits the rider the way it used to. That is the real consequence. Weight becomes more noticeable over time. Comfort matters more on longer rides. Handling plays a bigger role in everyday use. These are not small details. They shape the entire experience. A bike can look right and still feel wrong after a few hours on the road. That difference changes how often it gets ridden. It also changes how long someone keeps it. A bike can look right, but if it doesn't feel right after a few hours, that's what matters. When the experience stops aligning with real use, the connection weakens. Riders adjust by riding less or looking for something that fits better. This is not about appearance or branding. It is about how the machine performs over time. Comfort, control, and ease of use define whether it stays in the garage or stays on the road. As expectations shift toward practicality, the gap becomes more obvious. What worked before does not always work now. That mismatch builds slowly, but it carries weight. It affects how people ride and what they choose next. Physical experience defines long-term use. Comfort, control, and ease determine how often a bike is ridden. When those elements align, the machine becomes part of everyday life. When they do not, usage declines. That difference builds gradually, but becomes clear over time as riding patterns shift in response. When the machine no longer fits the rider, the decision to move on becomes easier than staying. The market moved. The shift is already happening. Demand is moving away from heavy premium machines and towards something more practical. That is the real change. Riders are choosing motorcycles that fit their daily use, instead of ones that only represent an idea. Mid-range bikes are growing because they make sense. They are easier to live with, easier to maintain, and easier to ride consistently. That combination matters more than status now. It keeps people on the road instead of keeping bikes parked. Accessibility is becoming the deciding factor. When something feels usable in real life, it becomes more valuable than something that only looks impressive. That is what is driving this movement forward. This isn't a trend, it's where the market is heading. This direction does not reverse easily. Once riders adjust to practicality, they do not go back to complexity without a reason. That behavior reinforces itself over time. The shift is not dramatic, but it is steady. It shows up in what people are buying and how often they are riding. It builds slowly until it becomes the new standard. The more this pattern repeats, the harder it becomes for any brand to ignore it. The market does not wait for anyone to catch up. Market direction is shaped by repeated behavior. When riders consistently choose practicality, that choice becomes the new standard. Over time, it influences production, pricing, and design. What begins as a preference evolves into expectation. Once that expectation is established, it becomes difficult for any brand to move against it. When direction changes at this level, it forces reactions across the entire industry. Everyone is reacting. You can see the response everywhere. Manufacturers are expanding their accessible lineups and focusing on usability. That is not coincidence. It is a reaction to what riders are choosing. Brands that once stayed in narrow segments are starting to reposition themselves. They are introducing models that appeal to a wider range of riders. That move is happening across multiple companies at the same time. Pressure is building from all sides. When one company proves that a different approach works, others follow quickly. No one wants to be left behind when the market shifts this clearly. You can tell a shift is real when everyone starts moving at the same time. This is not about copying one brand. It is about responding to the same signals. Those signals are coming directly from rider behavior. Strategic changes like this do not happen without reason. They come from observing what works and adjusting accordingly. The more companies move in this direction, the stronger the shift becomes. It creates momentum that is difficult to reverse. What started as a single approach becomes an industry-wide adjustment. Industry movement reflects shared observation. When multiple companies adjust at once, it signals a broader shift. Each response reinforces the next, creating a collective change in direction. That alignment does not happen randomly. It comes from recognizing the same patterns and acting on them at roughly the same time. Still, the most important change is not happening inside companies. Buyers think different. The real shift is in how riders think before they buy. Decisions are no longer driven by image alone. Practicality has taken the lead. That is the key change. Ownership experience matters more than appearance. Riders are paying attention to how a bike fits into their daily life. They think about comfort, reliability, and ease of use before anything else. Long-term thinking is replacing impulse. Instead of reacting to emotion in the moment, buyers are considering how the bike will hold up over time. That changes what they choose and why they choose it. People aren't buying the same way anymore, and you can see it in what's on the road. This change is visible in real riding patterns. Bikes that get used regularly stand out. Machines that sit unused tell a different story. Expectations are shifting toward consistency. Riders want something they can rely on without second-guessing their decision. That mindset does not reverse quickly. Once someone starts thinking this way, it becomes their standard for every future purchase. The decision process itself has changed, and that change shapes the entire market. Decision-making evolves with experience. Riders begin to prioritize outcomes over impressions. They consider how a machine fits into daily life instead of how it looks in the moment. That shift changes purchasing behavior in lasting ways. It influences not only current choices, but also expectations for every future decision. With that shift in place, the final piece becomes clear: the real shift. This is not about one brand defeating another. That is the surface-level view. The deeper reality is about alignment. One side adjusted to what riders actually need. The other held on to what used to work. The ground moved underneath both of them. One adapted to that movement, while the other stayed where it was. That difference created the gap. It is not about who builds the better machine in isolation. It is about who builds something that fits the current moment. That is where the separation happens. Sometimes it's not about who's better. It's about who actually changed when everything else did. Change does not wait for approval. It happens whether companies are ready or not. The ones that respond early gain ground. The ones that delay lose it. This shift reflects real riding conditions, real expectations, and real limitations. It is grounded in how people actually use their motorcycles. When alignment matches reality, the results follow naturally. When it does not, the distance grows over time. Long-term outcomes depend on alignment. When a product matches real use, it maintains relevance. When it does not, it slowly falls behind. This process is gradual but consistent. Over time, the gap widens between what exists and what is needed, and that difference defines which direction things move. Harley still has the badge, the sound, and the history, but history does not guarantee the future when riders start choosing something simpler, lighter, and easier to afford. Royal Enfield is not winning by copying Harley. It is winning by answering what today's riders actually need. If you think Harley can fight back, or Royal Enfield is already taking over, share your take in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more real motorcycle breakdowns.